The opulent hum of the Emerald City Gala was a carefully curated symphony, smooth jazz that felt less like music and more like a gentle, ceaseless current, mingling with the clink of crystal and the murmur of polished conversations. But for me, Liam Sterling, the melody was discordant. I stood near a towering ice sculpture that wept into an illuminated basin, clutching a glass of sparkling water. A man out of time and place in a muted gray suit that felt increasingly like a costume. My dark blonde hair, usually compliant, felt stubbornly mussed, mirroring the knot in my stomach. What if the most beautiful laughter you've ever known suddenly becomes your deepest fear? That was the moment it truly began. I scanned the glittering crowd for Mila, my wife, expecting that familiar spark of recognition across the room. Instead, she emerged from the throng, not alone, but walking beside him. Her hand wasn't in mine. Her face didn't hold that soft, intimate smile I cherished. No, she was laughing, a bright, uninhibited peal that used to be reserved for my most clumsy attempts at humor, for my most ridiculous stories. Now it resonated beside a stranger, a man whose presence instantly curdled the air around me. He moved with the effortless arrogance of someone who'd never tasted doubt. His charcoal suit was tailored to perfection, worn without a tie. The sleeves of his crisp white shirt rolled back to reveal an intricate, almost predatory tattoo coiling on his forearm. He possessed that disarming charm, the kind people inexplicably gravitate towards. And when his dark, intelligent eyes met mine, there was no flicker of surprise or even acknowledgement. He simply regarded me with an unsettling boredom, as if I were a momentary, inconvenient pause in their captivating exchange. Mila, my auburn-haired, emerald-green-clad wife, said nothing, merely turning to him to murmur something I couldn't discern. He offered no handshake, no greeting. Instead, he just raised one eyebrow, fixed me with that knowing gaze, and let out a soft, dismissive chuckle, as if I were the punchline to a very private, very amusing joke. Then he extended a hand, holding a wineglass. "I believe this one's yours," Dorian Maxwell drawled, his voice a smooth, low rumble. I hadn't asked for it. I hadn't said a word. Yet he presented it to me like a consolation prize or, worse, a pre-measured dose of poison. Mila finally broke her silence, her voice a shade too bright. "Liam, babe, you look a little pale." Pale wasn't the word. Hollow, perhaps, because in that precise instant, standing before them, watching her in that stunning emerald dress, the one I thought wasn't special enough for our anniversary dinner last week, and him with that casual practice smirk, I understood. I wasn't her date. I was her husband, a label, a formality, still etched on paper, but already meticulously erased from her heart. This wasn't a celebration. It was a deliberate, brutal redefinition. And I was the forgotten footnote. I should have walked away. The exit was right there, a quiet escape route from this polished rooftop nightmare. But I stood, clutching the wine glass like it was the only anchor to a reality I still barely recognized. Mila continued her animated conversation with Dorian, oblivious to my fading presence. She didn't introduce me, didn't offer a reassuring touch, didn't even spare a glance to confirm I was still breathing. I began to feel like background scenery, another carefully placed potted palm on the periphery of their vibrant, self-contained universe. At one point, she threw her head back, laughing at something Dorian had said, her hand instinctively reaching for his shoulder, her body folding toward him in an intimate, effortless arc. I told myself it was nothing. I always told myself that. I stood there nodding along to a conversation I was pointedly excluded from. Finally, she turned to me, her voice laced with a saccharine sweetness I hadn't heard in years. "Liam, you're so quiet. Everything all right?" It was the tone one reserves for a lost stranger. I mumbled a pathetic excuse about a headache. Dorian, without missing a beat, interjected, "Rough week at the office, huh?" It was said with such casual familiarity, as if he'd been briefed on my entire existence. I almost asked him how much he knew, how much my own wife had confided in him, but the words caught in my throat. I managed a weak smile, muttered something polite, and excused myself, ostensibly for the men's room. Instead, I drifted through the elegant venue like a ghost, the echoes of manufactured laughter and hollow congratulations bouncing off the towering glass walls. I found myself lingering near the catering table, pretending to be utterly captivated by an avant-garde truffle canapé I couldn't pronounce. And then I saw it, across the shimmering expanse of the venue, past the delicate string lights and the centerpiece of twisting glass. Mila and Dorian were heading toward the elevators, alone. She wasn't holding his hand, but the proximity, the relaxed ease in her posture, the way she leaned ever so slightly into his space. It wasn't clandestine. It was comfortable. It was where she belonged. I watched them disappear around a corner, frozen, a plastic toothpick still clutched in my hand, desperately trying to recall when I had become this man. When had I become the husband who watched his wife walk off with another man and did absolutely nothing? I must have remained by that catering table for a solid 15 minutes, the surrounding chatter of minor victories and celebratory toasts, a stark counterpoint to the spiraling chaos in my mind. My thoughts were a scrambled mess, fragmented images and sounds from a life I no longer recognized. Mila and I used to share illicit texts during boring work meetings, send each other ridiculous memes, complain about our neighbor's yappy dog. Now she was disappearing into elevators with another man, while I stood debating the merits of another mini quiche, just to give my trembling hands something to do. I didn't go looking for them. I told myself I wasn't that type of husband. But the truth, the raw, ugly truth, was that I was terrified of what I might find. I simply drifted back to the railing, overlooking the glittering harbor, staring at the dark water, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that this was a professional moment misunderstood, that Mila was loyal, honest, that I hadn't truly seen her fingers brush his back as they walked away. Here's the chilling secret about betrayal. It often re-enters the room with a smile. 20 minutes later, she reappeared, as if nothing had happened. Her auburn hair was slightly windblown, her lips freshly glossed. "Sorry," she said lightly, a careless shrug. "Dorian wanted to show me the branding mock-ups on his phone. You'd hate them." Just like that, the lie was folded into a joke, an implication that I was too boring to even care. She leaned in to press a cold, dry kiss to my cheek, then plucked a champagne flute from a passing tray. I watched her sip it, her eyes fixed on her phone, texting someone, undoubtedly him. The screen was angled precisely away from me, a silent, impenetrable barrier. I yearned to leave. I should have. But instead, I remained beside her, a human placeholder, a rented mannequin with a wedding band. And when Dorian walked past us an hour later, he didn't speak. He simply met my gaze, the same knowing smirk, the same unreadable eyes, and offered the slightest, most imperceptible nod. Not a greeting, not a farewell, but a silent message that echoed deep in my bones. A message that simply stated, "You know." And the worst part, he was absolutely right. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of silence. It was the sharp, crystalline hush that fills a car when two people are expertly pretending not to feel the tectonic plates shifting beneath them. I stared out the window, lost in the blur of city lights, while Mila scrolled on her phone, occasionally letting out soft, breathy sounds that were almost laughter, stifled just enough to keep me guessing. When we pulled into our driveway, she didn't wait for me to unlock the front door, a small ritual we'd shared for years. Her heels clicked ahead with the same confident stride she'd worn at the gala. I followed, still unsure if I would finally confront her or bury it all under a blanket of false peace. Inside, she poured herself another glass of wine. "Want anything?" she asked without looking up. "No," I said. She merely shrugged. "Your loss," she mumbled, sinking onto the couch, legs tucked beneath her, as if it were just another unremarkable Friday night. I sat across from her, studying her face, desperate to find the woman I'd married, the one I used to fall asleep beside without a single doubt. Finally, the words escaped me. "So, what's going on with you and Dorian?" She didn't flinch. She didn't even bother to feign confusion. Instead, she gave me a look that screamed, "Seriously? Are you going to start this now?" Then she sighed, a weary exhalation that suggested I was an unbearable burden. He's new. We're friendly, that's all. Don't make this weird, Liam. But it was weird. It had been weird the moment his eyes dismissed me, the moment she chose not to hold my hand in a room full of strangers. I wanted to rage, to demand explanations, but the words felt trapped, fearing they would only make me sound insecure. So I merely asked, "Why didn't you tell me you two were close?" She laughed then, a sharp, unkind sound. "Because we're not. You're reading into everything again, like you always do." Just like that, I became the problem. Her tone slammed the door on the conversation before I even had a chance to knock. I went upstairs early, lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and listened as she remained downstairs, texting for another hour. In the oppressive dark, I finally admitted something to myself that chilled me to the bone. I wasn't afraid she was cheating. I was afraid she had already moved on and just hadn't bothered to tell me yet. The next morning felt like a performance. She brewed coffee, hummed an unfamiliar tune under her breath, acting as if the previous night had been an ordinary, uneventful company gathering. I watched her from across the kitchen island, noticing how her gaze carefully avoided mine. That deliberate avoidance spoke volumes, louder than any argument we could have had. I asked about her plans for the day, and without missing a beat, she announced she was going into the office on a Saturday. "Lots of backlog since the new team started," she explained, pulling her auburn hair into a sleek ponytail. "Dorian's helping coordinate a pitch we need to finalize." She uttered his name like a challenge, a test. I didn't take the bait. I simply nodded, feeling like a fool, though my throat felt raw, as if I'd swallowed broken glass. I waited until she left, then sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. How much longer could I keep up this charade? It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a slow, creeping dread, the certain knowledge that I was being meticulously erased from the narrative of my own marriage. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept returning to that smirk. Dorian's smirk. The way he looked at me, as if he were already inhabiting the life I once shared with Mila. By noon, I gave in. I checked her location on my phone, an act I had never stooped to before. It showed she was at her office building. A fleeting wave of relief washed over me, only to be immediately followed by the bitter question, why was that the bar now? Just knowing she was where she said she'd be, the knot in my stomach tightened further. I told myself I was only going to drive by, just to confirm, to prove my paranoia wrong. But when I got there, I didn't even park. I just circled the block like a coward. On my second pass, I saw her car in the lot. His was there too, the same sleek black sedan he'd driven to the gala. They were both there, together on a Saturday. I couldn't bring myself to go in. I couldn't face the look she might give me, the one that screamed, "You don't belong here anymore." So I drove home, sat in the driveway for almost an hour, wondering when I had become the kind of man who was scared of his own wife. That night she came home late, said they grabbed lunch while working. "Long day," she mumbled, stretching. "Dorian's a machine." I smiled, a hollow gesture, as if I believed her. Then I watched her walk past me again, phone already in hand, and a terrifying realization solidified. I was no longer part of her long days or her long nights. I was just the guy still refilling the coffee filters and pretending he didn't see what was right in front of him. By Sunday, the patterns that had always been there, subtle and dismissed, now blared like sirens. Or perhaps I had seen them all along, only refusing to acknowledge their true meaning. Her sudden enthusiasm for late-night strategy calls. The way she now locked her phone, even within the confines of our home. The new expensive perfume bottle I found tucked behind the bathroom mirror, a scent I'd never once caught on her around me. Every tiny detail became a damning clue. Every action felt scripted. Every excuse just convincing enough to keep me silent. I spent most of the day engaged in mindless chores. Laundry, dishes, reorganizing the garage, anything to avoid sitting still long enough for my thoughts to corner me. Around 5 p.m., she came downstairs wearing jeans and a silk blouse I hadn't seen before. Casual, yes, but meticulously chosen. I asked where she was going. Dorian invited a few of us to his place for drinks, she said, tapping her phone, a half smile playing on her lips as she thumbed through texts. Just a little wind down after the project, she added almost as an afterthought. It's mostly the creative team. You wouldn't know anyone. That last sentence landed with the force of a physical blow. You wouldn't know anyone. Not you wouldn't enjoy it. Not you'd be uncomfortable. Just a casual, definitive confirmation that I no longer existed in her world. I watched her drive off, a lightness in her posture, like someone shedding a great weight. And then I knew. I was the weight. I was what she cast off when she stepped out that door. Hours bled into each other. I paced the house, contemplating a call. I didn't. Instead, I searched Dorian Maxwell's name online. LinkedIn, his public Instagram. I wasn't proud of it, but I scrolled through dozens of meticulously curated moments. Vacation photos, leadership retreats, group shots where Mila was sometimes a blurry figure in the background, smiling as if she had nothing, absolutely nothing to hide. At midnight, she still wasn't home. I texted, "Hey, everything okay?" No reply. At 1:14 a.m., the front door clicked softly. She crept in, shoes in hand, her auburn hair slightly undone. She froze when she saw me on the stairs. I said nothing. Neither did she. She simply walked past me, whispering, "Don't start." And I didn't, because whatever she was going to say next, I already knew it wouldn't be the truth. The next morning, the sun felt intrusive, as if it had no business illuminating a house so utterly saturated with silence. She acted as if nothing out of the ordinary had transpired. She poured herself coffee, scrolled her phone, and barely glanced at me save for a single tired morning that sounded more like a warning than a greeting. I wanted to ask her where she'd been, what took so long, why she hadn't answered my message. But I didn't. I just sat there, a silent prop in our own kitchen, waiting for a version of her that was never coming back. By noon, she left again, claiming errands, though she didn't specify what kind or where. I was alone, so I did something I never, in my wildest dreams, imagined I'd do. I opened her laptop. I know. Privacy, trust, all of it. But I'd already lost those things. I wasn't invading her space. I was searching for the scattered pieces of my own. The laptop wasn't even password protected. It opened right up. Perhaps she hadn't thought I'd ever look. Or perhaps, far more chillingly, she simply didn't care if I did. The first thing I saw was a chat application I didn't recognize. Not email, not Slack, something else. I clicked it. Her most recent conversation was still open, with Dorian Maxwell. His messages were casual, almost smug. "Last night was amazing. You looked incredible." Hers, a line that twisted a blade in my gut. "You make it way too easy to forget about real life." I sat there frozen, rereading the words again and again. Not angry, not shocked, just profoundly, terrifyingly hollow. I scrolled back a little. More messages, more late-night jokes, photos. Him at a rustic cabin, her asking, "When's the next escape?" I closed the laptop and just sat there. The kitchen felt different, smaller, as if the walls were closing in. And I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. When she came home, I didn't say anything. I couldn't. She pressed a light kiss to my cheek, tossed her keys in the bowl like always, and walked right upstairs. And in that moment, I realized the sickest part of all this wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how effortlessly she wore the lie, how perfectly practiced her rhythm was now, how utterly familiar this new vanished version of her had become. I wasn't married to a stranger. I was married to someone who had learned how to smile while slowly, methodically, disappearing. And I didn't know what scared me more. The idea that she'd been planning to leave, or that she already had, and just forgotten to take me out of the picture. I didn't confront her right away, not because I was afraid of the truth. I already had that. But because I needed time to understand what I wanted from the wreckage of my life. For days, I moved like a shadow through our house, feigning interest in groceries, laundry, the weather. I didn't touch her, barely spoke, and she didn't seem to notice. Or perhaps she simply didn't care. I kept hearing Dorian's name in passing. He's such a visionary. We've got a great dynamic. He understands how I think. It was like watching someone replace me, piece by agonizing piece in slow motion. But I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was planning. Not revenge, not drama, but something far more potent. Freedom. I started quietly packing my things in one box at a time. Old sweatshirts, a few dog-eared books she never noticed were gone. My father's watch. I opened a new checking account, found a rental an hour outside the city. Quiet, surrounded by whispering trees, with a working fireplace and no shared walls. And then, one ordinary morning, while she was still asleep, I left a note on the kitchen counter. It didn't beg or accuse. It simply read, "You've already started a new life." I just made it official. I left my wedding ring beside it, face down, a final, unhesitating punctuation mark. Walking away wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, clean, like quietly closing a book you no longer wish to finish. I haven't heard from her since, and maybe that's the real answer. It's been 3 months now. My new place is small, but it holds a profound peace. I've started cooking again, rediscovering the joy of creating something from scratch. I adopted a rescue dog named Milo, a scruffy terrier mix who reminds me what unconditional loyalty feels like. I even reconnected with an old college friend who, with his booming laughter, helped me recall what genuine joy sounds like. I'm still healing, still piecing together who Liam Sterling is without Miller Reynolds. But for the first time in a very long time, I don't feel like a placeholder. I feel like a person.